Chapter 16. Towers. You see, we remain the very picture of courtesy. Even in the face of such impolite accusations, we have nothing to hide here. Manhattan. Just over 200 years ago, it was a thriving, bustling metropolis. Manhattan was hailed as the most cosmopolitan city in all of Equestria. Millions of ponies lived or worked in the city, and was home to some of the most elite circles of equestrian society. Then, in an instant, Manhattan was gone. Millions of pony lives were consumed in a flash of light, heat, and magical energy. Hundreds of thousands or more were killed by the shock waves and the eldritch green fires that incinerated virtually everything that was left standing. Now, all that remained of Manhattan in the aftermath of the apocalypse were the Manhattan ruins, miles upon miles of maze-like urban devastation, and ashes under the shadows of skeletal skyscrapers that rose out of the wreckage like monolithic tombstones. A pony might wonder how such a holocaust could have been allowed to happen. How could Equestria's enemies have smuggled such a cataclysmic weapon into the very heart of our grandest and largest metropolis? I found it was much easier to understand now I knew the most significant public transportation company in Manhattan was run by trader ponies loyal to Equestria's enemies, and that the basement of this very facility had been the staging ground for zebra operations within our homeland. I stared into the eyes of zombie zebras and realised that this was how they'd gotten the balefire bomb into Manhattan, that these zebras had been responsible for the murder of millions. I also realised that the mini stable under 4 stars fell short of stable tech's quality. For all the harm stable tech's playing around had done, these ponies really knew how to build a survival shelter. This inferior stable had not been able to stop magical radiation from bleeding in, transforming the zebras, and almost a dozen ponies it had been intended to protect, into the ghoulish creatures before me. And yes, I realised they might not be zombie zebras so much as ghoul zebras. I'd say I didn't care, but part of me actually hoped they were ghouls as I stepped back out of the way. Steel hooves, give them everything you've got. The fog lifted by mid-afternoon, revealing the graveyard of the Manhattan ruins beneath a sky of rolling, angry grey. We walked above it, travelling single file along one of the twin monorails of the Lunar Line, looking down on the blocks of city rubble below. In all directions, we saw collapsed and gutted buildings, blackened chariots and wagons, detritus and blown litter that congregated about the metal shafts of shattered steel lamps. No skeletons, though. The living creatures of Manhattan had been reduced to nothing more than ash, mixing with the ash from a billion other sources as it was carried by the wind. I was beginning to spot a few small places where green balefire still burned. I wondered how even balefire could have survived for centuries. The wind carried particles of rust and ash, as well as the smells of the urban graveyard. A symphony of creaks and groans haunted the city, mixing with the sounds of shifting and crumbling concrete and the humming of wind-blown metal. Occasional staccatos of gunfire, usually distant and carried on echoes, reminded us that there were raiders, scavengers, and other ponies lurking in hidden streets and darkened structures. A flash of green and gold shot past from behind, a magnificent bird both terrifying and graceful, which spread its wings and circled as if taking in our measure. Its eyes seemed to glow, and licks of balefire fell from its beak.
What is that?
Velvet Remedy asked with a tone of awe, before I could find the words to ask for myself. Balefire, Phoenix, Steelhooves replied, whistling slightly. The green-golden bird completed its circle, then swooped down and away, disappearing from sight as it threaded through the shadowed alleys. We began to move again, all except Velvet Remedy, who just stood there as if mesmerised. She turned to Steelhooves, breathily demanding,
Tell me about them.
Whinnying, we all halted again. Interesting fact about travelling single file, if one pony stops, unless they're at the back, travel tends to stop with them. I found myself staring at a ruined billboard, whose bottle of sparkle cola Rad seemed to actually glow. It's like a buck to the face, with radishes. Billboards littered the sky along the Lunar Line like weeds. The Manhattan Gardens was the largest wildlife sanctuary of its kind, home to the most exotic and admired creatures, all of which were instantly cremated when the zebra's balefire bomb detonated. Steelhooves explained. Of course, a phoenix doesn't exactly have the same relationship with being turned to ash that most creatures do. Steelhooves chuckled. I wouldn't be thinking of trying to domesticate one. They breathe fire. A battered, sea blue mare fled out of the doorless storefront and started running down the street, tears streaming from her eyes as she screamed. A dozen raider ponies, each carrying a brutal weapon and wearing an old roller derby helmet, came tearing out of the building after her, jumping out of the windows and charging out the door, whooping and laughing. Help me! She stumbled as she ran, her gait hobbled, Blood ran down between her thighs. I could see her bleeding through my scope. Please, some pony help me! She'd already been raped repeatedly. Now they had let her go and were chasing her for sport. From the height of the lunar line, we were too far for stats to effectively lock on, so I trailed the scope in front of the first raider, a malted brown and grey pony with a cutie mark of a skull with burning eyes, aiming for where he was about to be as Calamity instructed. Good, now keep her steady and squeeze out a burst. I magically pulled the trigger. 3 shots spat out of the scope Zebra assault carbine. Silenced weapons, I learned, were not really silent, but the dampened sound was lost in the wind, and the weight of the silencer helped soften the recoil and keep the rifle on target between bullets. The raider pony burst into flames. He fell to the ground, screaming and thrashing. I stepped back, floating out the rifle to check the clip while Calamity took a shot. No, I hadn't accidentally loaded magical bullets. The Zebra rifle had enchanted the bullet itself. Stick a horn where Celestia didn't shine. If this was the sort of weapon that zebras had been carrying onto the battlefield. The screams of the victim mare below wrenched my attention back to the battle. Calamity fired off a second shot, pulling the scope to my eyes. I saw that the 3 raiders were now dead, one of the corpses burning in the street, and the others were scattering. The panicking mare screamed, her hooves catching on a toppled street lamp, and fell, skidding across the debris-strewn street. One of the raiders was still charging towards her. I swung the scope towards him, and froze as I really saw him. One of the rapists had been a blank-flanked colt. I started following the very young pony with the zebra's rifle scope, trembling slightly. He was wearing a Colt's roller derby helmet and clenched a serrated knife in his mouth. I could see her blood on him. I focused, the trigger of the zebra rifle moving slightly. I couldn't. It was a Colt. Horrified, I watched as the Colt reached the fallen mare, dodging the kick she threw at him. I heard the crack of a gunfire feet from me, and saw the Colt's body rupture bloodily in 2 pieces, hit with enough force to fling his corpse against a nearby mailbox. I lowered the zebra rifle, and turned to stare at Calamity in shock. On the other side of him, Velvet Remedy's eyes were wide. "What?" Calamity asked before flying down to help the mare. "Did I steal your shot?" Ponies love laughter. Zebras do not understand joy and fear it. Ponies are honest. Zebras tell only lies. Ponies are loyal. Zebras will knife you in the back. Ponies are generous. Zebras are selfish and greedy. Ponies care about each other. Zebras care only about themselves. I stared up at the billboard and thought, wow.
That's just wrong.
Velvet Remedy said, breaking the uncomfortable silence that had become our travelling companion since Calamity shot the Raider Colt. The twin monorail tracks took a graceful curve, and the billboard was mounted across the flying buttress of a squat skyscraper, placed so that the ponies would be able to see it as they approached the turn. It would have dominated the view out one side of the elevated train as it took the bend. Calamity had flown off ahead, more to give us space and out of the need to scout. The lunar line seemed free of threats. I really wanted a party time Mintool. I didn't have any particular need for one, but I felt myself craving the effects, especially the intellectual boost. I could just think so much faster, so much more clearly when benefacting from a PTM. I was more aware, my senses more acute. If that's what party time Mintools did for me, I began to wonder what they did for Pinkie Pie. I found myself thinking about 4 stars again, based on what we had found in the mini-stable, which wasn't much after Steelhoof's ordnance was finished with the zebras. The Ministry of Morale raid must have happened the same morning the Balefire bomb was set off. It occurred to me that the Megaspell was probably in transit when they attacked. The Ministry of Morale had brought in Steel Rangers. They knew what they were heading into called for the big guns. Knowing where to look, who to interrogate. Did that come from the skill of the ponies in her employ? Or did Pinkie Pie herself discern these things with the power of PTM-enhanced acumen? Biased, I presumed, the latter. No matter what the negative effects she might have suffered from the PTM addiction, Pinkie Pie had intuition that bordered on precognition. The traders were terrified of her ministry, she had them paranoid and scurrying, and no matter what any pony might say about either her or her ministry, Pinkie Pie had come heartbreakingly close to saving Manhattan. I stopped, looking out over the desolate urban maze. Millions of ponies had died here, their salvation racing the clock and losing. I had to find something else to think about. I switched to DJ Pony's radio broadcast, listening to it in my earbloom. It was merely a distraction. I knew all the songs by heart now. I hoped DJ Pony found something in the records we carried worthy of expanding his musical repertoire. "This just in," DJ Pony announced between songs. "Just got a report that a weak distress signal can be heard near Horseshoe Tower. Seems like Blackwing's talons have managed to get themselves over their beaks. Well, don't worry, Blackwing. Horseshoe Tower's pretty close to Sheriff Rottentail's territory. maybe some of his ghouls will be willing to lend you a hoof. Oh, wait, that's right. You and your merc slaughtered them all. Well, good luck with that. This is DJ Pony, reminding every pony in the Equestrian Wasteland, you reap what you sow. Calamity was flying back towards us. I turned off the radio of my pit-buck as he landed on the monorail. Y'all gonna love this. Several minutes later, we had trotted far enough along the curve to see what Calamity had told us about. Ahead, the celestial line crossed over the lunar line, about 20 feet above the lunar line, running perpendicular to the twin monorails below. The dark underside of the twin celestial rail struck me as bizarrely textured, giving me the creeps.
Well, how do we get up there?
Velvet Remedy scoffed. Calamity rolled his eyes and fluttered his wings. I'll carry him up, is how? 'Cept, I'm thinking our steel ranger friend is a mite heavy for me. I can levitate him up as you carry me, I offered. Calamity nodded. Alright then, just be careful, little Pip. You don't want to disturb the blood wings.
Blood wings?
I floated out the binoculars, peering through them at the celestial line, and cringed with a gasp. The shadowed underbellies of the monorails were covered with the grotesque, leathery forms of dozens of giant, mutant bats. Yep. I figure we best make good time to Ten Pony. Reckon we don't want to be outside in the open when come nightfall. As difficult as it was to get onto the celestial line, getting off the monorail was easy. Twilight was falling as we rounded a bend, and were met with a graceful arch of tarnished silver, which flowed up and over the monorails. Through the arch, we could finally see Ten Pony Tower in a surprisingly well-preserved splendour. We had been catching glimpses of it above and between the buildings for hours, but only now could we truly take in the size and ornateness of the structure. Light glowed behind more than half of the windows, most of which bore fractures but were fully intact. The building narrowed every dozen stories with a level ringed by a patio balcony, the fencing around each spotted with crude repair. One whole side of Ten Pony Tower was blackened and sagging, bulwarked by patchwork reinforcements added over post-apocalyptic decades. The original name of the building had collapsed into the cobblestone courtyard below. A huge radio tower rose from the roof towards the sky. The monorails passed under the archway, which would once have been dazzling in the sun, and right up to Ten Pony Tower, where they ran through a 4-stars embarked station built into the side of the tower, many stories above the ground. From the tarnished arch hung a sign proclaiming, Ministry of Arcane Science, Manhattan Hub. Entering the station, we saw guard ponies barricaded behind massive steel walls, watching our approach through narrowed slits as they followed our progress with their guns. The walls of the station were decorated with life-sized paintings of ponies. Once, the paintings had been protected by fields of magical energy, similar to Velvet Remedy's spell. Now, most of the paintings were blackened, damaged, or defaced beyond repair, the shields having failed and the gemstones which held their enchantments stolen. All save for one, a painting of a familiar purple unicorn, the once pink and violet stripes in her mane mostly changed to grey. I hopped onto the sidewalk that ran along the wall, giving the painting a closer look. The edges were charred, and the paint had blistered in the heat, but the protective field still held. The others paused, watching me, but I waved them on. I just want to look. I'll catch up. Each of my companions nodded and trotted on, none of them seemed to possess my curiosity. While no spring filly, Twilight Sparkle looked at least a decade younger in this painting than in the memory of Pinkie Pie's last party, and considerably happier. She was surrounded by crisp autumn colours, a number of hazy, barely rendered ponies creating colourful blotches around her in the background. Her cutie mark was hidden, covered by a flank blanket bearing the number 10. The running of the leaves. A voice announced behind me, startling me so badly I nearly jumped back to my death. I turned to glare at the sprite bot, which had seemed to materialise out of nowhere. Twilight Sparkle ran it every year in Ponyville. Never won. To me, the mechanical voice sounded nostalgic? That was until the Ministry demanded all of her time. I gazed at the purple pony, with the number 10 on her flank. Then, I looked up to the mostly intact skyscraper which had once been a Ministry of Magic hub. The massive letters had once advertised its name fallen and shattered on the ground below, and then looked back. I smiled, turning to the sprite bot. How did you know Twat? But with a crack of static, Watcher was gone, the sprite bot suddenly spewing tuba music. I scowled as I watched the spherical robot bob away. Was it just me, or were conversations with Watcher getting shorter? Ponies don't simply walk into Ten Pony Tower. The guard informed us, scaling through an armoured window as he spoke through the intercom. The words, "No zombies," were painted across the gate in huge, red letters.
We have business with DJ Pony,
Velvet Remedy started loftily.
Although, if you want to explain to him that you turned us away...
DJ Pony is expecting you then?
Absolutely.
Velvet Remedy lied silkily.
And if I were you, I wouldn't want to keep him waiting.
All of you? The voice was skeptical. Velvet Remedy gave an overdramatic sigh.
This is my bodyguard,
She claimed, pointing to Calamity.
and I'm sure you recognise a member of the Steel Rangers.
I do.
And?
Velvet Remedy looked to me and seemed to draw a blank. Hastily, I offered, "Toaster repair pony." Every pony gave me a strange look. His toaster's on the fritz. Velvet Remedy looked pained. The guard contemplated us silently. Finally, Velvet Remedy said,
Look, as much as I'd love to just stand here outside while you get in trouble for not letting us in, it is getting dark. Would 100 bottle caps help move things along?
200.
125, and I don't tell DJ Pony that you tried to extort his guests.
Fine.
The gun slot opened in the door.
Slide the caps through, then you can come in.
I started pulling out and counting bottle caps. I was going to have to start bundling them into small pouches of 20 to make this sort of thing easier. 200 was a large chunk of the bottle caps we'd managed to acquire, but I wasn't worried. We had plenty of guns and ammos to sell once inside.
Oh, the guard added, and you'll have to disarm before passing through the checkpoint.
Stick a horn. Y'all ain't getting my battle saddle unless you pry it off my cold, dead. The guard scoffed.
Wouldn't expect to. You don't have to turn in your firearms and battle saddles, just your ammo, all of it.
I raised my eyebrows in surprise. Unexpected. That also severely cut our trade goods, but at least left us with the more expensive and heavier objects to sell off. As we passed through the checkpoint, a unicorn stepped out of the guard post and waved her horn over us. Every clip, bullet, grenade, and missile flashed, visible even through Steelhoof's metal armor.
Toaster repair pony.
She repeated with a demure smile as her gaze passed over my sniper rifle, combat shotgun, zebra assault rifle, assault carbine. I faced hoofed.
And a Steel Ranger?
She asked as she removed the missiles from the left side of Steelhoof's battle saddle.
What's your story?
Steelhooves whinnied. I'm just here to make sure you don't have any more nasty ghoul problems.
Oh, that is no longer a concern.
She smiled.
But thank you for the concern.
Indeed, kind of a filthy ghoul just walking in anywhere. Calamity was shooting Steelhoof's dark looks. Velvet Remedy nickered under her breath, just loud enough to make sure she was heard.
Oh yes, they're unsightly things. Can't imagine anything worse, except maybe a cult killer.
Calamity neighed and rolled his eyes, lowering the brim of his hat. In minutes, we were divested of all our ammo.
You'll get it all back when you leave.
The unicorn promised primally as she collected it all and floated it into the guardhouse. I feel strangely naked, Calamity complained. At least my weapons had only been reduced to fancy clubs.
You can probably buy some rubber bullets from Chief Grimstar if you really feel you need to.
The unicorn informed us as the guardhouse door slid shut behind her. Calamity and I exchanged surprised looks. It was the first I'd heard any pony utilising non-lethal ordnance. There was a loud clank as something released inside the ornate, armoured double doors in front of us. They opened, swinging inwards and revealing the marbled, chandelier-lit station lobby of Tempony Tower. We were getting looks. The idea of high society was completely foreign to me. We had nothing like this sort of bizarre elitism in Stable 2. The wasteland was a dirty, broken, rusted place that was completely at odds with this stuffy behaviour. The only reason a pony might walk around with their nose in the air in places like New Appaloosa was because they didn't want to smell what they were walking in.
Let's hurry and find a place to make a bed.
Velvet Remedy pushed.
I need a bath.
Hell, these folks are making me feel like I need a bath, Calamity said, his head low, feeling the weight of all the stairs.
You do?
I nodded, wondering just how we would find a place to stay. We were walking across a mezzanine filled with high-class shops, or, at least, high-class relative to the rest of the equestrian wasteland. If we wanted to buy or sell anything here, Velvet Remedy had her work cut out for her. I suspected she was the only one with enough mercantile saviour flair to get these ponies to even talk to her. Velvet Remedy seemed to read my mind.
Once we've bathed and rested, we should split up. I'll take our goods to sell first thing in the morning, and then purchase us some formal wear that will help us blend in. Little Pip, you should look into meeting DJ Pony.
I agreed. I want to find a workshop. I want to modify my battle saddle. Until travelling with Little Pip, I never had more than one type of ammo. Want to set it up to quick swap between ammo types. Be nice to be able to use rubber bullets when the situation calls for it. He looked at Velvet Remedy and me. Y'all should give me your guns so I can do some more proper maintenance while I'm at it. Velvet Remedy floated her needler pistol over to him.
Situations like shooting a colt, perhaps.
Calamity neighed. Nope, I see a raider. I'm gonna take it down. The rust-coloured pony stared defiantly at Velvet Remedy, proudly insisting, "It's my policy."
It was a child.
Velvet Remedy hissed, giving a stomp. I looked around. My companions were beginning to make a scene. Maybe we should save this for... Any pony who chooses to be a filly murderer and raider gets tried and perforated as an adult, Calamity asserted.
And you think a colt or filly in that situation had any actual choice?
Calamity's eyes narrowed, and he cocked his head. Well, maybe not. Damn tragedy. But that don't mean I'm gonna give him a free pass to rape and murder till he gets his cutie mark. His would-be victims don't deserve that. Calamity's voice was rising dangerously. In case you didn't notice, my little rapist down there... Shut up! I finally ordered. I swear to the goddess, I'm gonna put you both in corners. Velvet Remedy and Calamity both bristled, but the interruption was enough to get them to look around and realise that this was not the place to be having that particular fight. The two of them remained silent for the rest of the evening, while I found a place at Golden Tail's Luxury Suites. It was a beautiful room. The marble walls were only slightly cracked, the twin bathtubs were only slightly stained, and the sheets on the bed were not too worn or frayed. I probably paid double what Velvet Remedy would have gotten for it, but I was happy just to get them away from the public. Tempers were more even the next morning. We had all bathed and washed our clothes. Calamity spent the first part of the morning sewing and patching our armour. My utility barding had been crusted with blood and punctured with bullet holes. Meanwhile, Velvet Remedy packed up the weapons and scavenged items for trade and headed out before the stores were open, wanting to look over our options. I spent the morning hungry. We decided that we should wait until Velvet Remedy returned with proper 10-pony attire before heading out to buy food. There were several swanky-looking restaurants that we had passed on our way to Golden Tail's Luxury Suites, and I was sick of canned and boxed pre-war food, which, as Velvet Remedy reminded us, we were almost out of and would need to stock up on. I took the chance to relax, laying on one of the beds and reading. I'd nearly finished all the books I'd collected, and I contemplated giving them to Velvet Remedy to sell, but in the end, I decided that I'd rather keep them back at my Junction R7 home, start a library. When Velvet Remedy returned, bringing us all new clothing, even a stately cloak for steel hooves, I nearly fell out of bed at the sight of her. She treated herself to a new coiffure and pony petty, and was wearing a classy new dress with matching new jewellery, along with a demure touch of blush. She fluttered her longer than ever eyelashes at me, and I felt faint. Part of me hated her for making me want her so much. Wow, Velvet, you look... Calamity flushed, looking a little overheated, but he stammered something about hoping she would have enough bottle caps for us to have breakfast. She turned up her nose at him.
Of course I do.
Looking at me, she broke into a gleeful grin, clopping her hooves.
And we have plenty extra to do a little shopping.
What do they have? Velvet Remedy smirked, rolling her eyes.
Oh, you wouldn't believe. These ponies have taken full of themselves to a whole new level.
She snickered.
2 floors down, there's a shop that sells only cheese. Right across from that, a shop that only sells wine.
As classy as she could be, Velvet Remedy didn't put any more value in being snobbish than the rest of us.
But of course, half the fun of shopping is just looking. Why? Was there something you were looking for?
Some new books, and rubber bullets. Velvet Remedy sighed. The restaurant was classy and filled with prim-looking ponies. I looked at my plate of food with a touch of depression. I don't know why I'd expected much more. It wasn't as if the ponies of 10 Pony Tower were farmers with fields of fresh grains. Instead, we got the same pre-war foods, only cooked in new ways and served in tiny but artistic portions. It didn't take long to eat, and I was still hungry. After breakfast, we split up. Calamity and Steelhoofs went to find Chief Grimstar, hoping to purchase bullets and possibly a suit of armoured barding more suitable for Velvet Remedy. The Zebra Legionnaire suit was stored away in Steelhoof's packs. Velvet Remedy didn't feel right wearing it, especially as we walked over the graves of countless ponies the zebras had murdered, and I didn't blame her, but I hated to just leave it or sell it when it could be useful. Velvet and I went purchasing supplies. Food was high priority, especially since I had no intention of eating at a restaurant again for as long as we were here. Looking at the rows of cans and boxes of fine edibles, I cringed at the prices. Maybe we should just get the minimum we'll need for the next couple days. We're bound to find more if we do a bit of scavenging. Velvet Remedy agreed, but only because she had other intentions for the cats we would be saving by doing so. We stocked up lightly. Then, I watched as Velvet Remedy haggled with the shop clerk until she got us a discount. As soon as we left Fine Edibles, I found myself being shoved into a spa, where Velvet Remedy absolutely insisted we both get full-body treatments. I was resistant at first, but as I began to unwind in the steam room, feeling muscles loosen that had probably been tight since my last night in the stable, I found myself letting out a grand sigh of relief. A couple of delightful spa ponies gave us absolutely heavenly massages. This was easily the best caps I'd ever spent, and, truth be told, the spa mare hoofing my back was beginning to really turn me on.
I heard that Fluttershy went to one of these places every week with my add a bunch of greats here, grand auntie.
Velvet Remedy confided as the lovely spa pony rubbed her hooves on my shoulders. I suddenly felt extra awkward. Later, as we lounged in a mud bath, my eye spotted a book sitting alone on a counter. Curious, I floated it over to take a look. Principles of Proper Pony Speech, I read aloud. Refining how we think by refining how we speak. I opened the book and looked down the title page. At the bottom, in small words, Official Guidelines from the Ministry of Image. I decided I'd ask the spa pony if I could buy the book. We were returning to our room after probably the most delightful morning ever, and my attention was focused on slipping my newly purchased book into my saddlebags when I collided with a stallion who was backing out of the cheese shop, knocking him over. My book fell to the floor, along with a number of boxes full of cheese. I recovered and began to offer him apologies and assistance when my eyes fell on the cheese-shaped cutie mark on his beige flank. You! Monterey Jack stood up, dusting himself off. Oh, it's you. A short grey unicorn, wearing a refined full barding, trotted out and looked at the scattered cheese, then at us. Is there a problem here? Yeah, this pony tried to rob me, after I saved his life. Now I was the one creating a scene, and I didn't care. Velvet Remedy was staring. Monterey Jack started picking out the boxes of cheese, lifting them with his teeth by their wrapping strings. He ignored me like I was a small, yapping animal. Is that true? The grey unicorn asked, looking to Monterey Jack. Monterey just snorted and finished stacking the cheese boxes, then focused, floating them towards the grey unicorn in the suit. Sorry about that, Homage. I'll credit your account 10% for the rough handling. Yes, it's true, I supplied for the beige unicorn. Of course his cutie mark looked like cheese, Monterey Jack at the cheese shop. A guard pony in the old MAS security armour and an LSW battle saddle was trotting towards us. Turning towards him, I pointed at Monterey. Sir, I'd like this pony arrested. The guard pony looked us both up and down. On what charge? Attempted robbery. The guard chuckled.
Monterey Jack prices are steep, but that's a stretch.
I shook my head. No, I rescued him from raiders and he repaid me by trying to rob me. Turning a glare on Monterey Jack, I added, they were going to shoot your hooves off, if I remember correctly. Maybe I should have let them. The guard looked at me skeptically.
When was this?
I paused and double-checked the date on my pit buck. 3 weeks ago. Had it really only been that long? I felt like I'd been outside a lot longer.
Sorry, the guard said firmly, but it's your word against his, and frankly, seeing as you aren't a 10-pony citizen, your word doesn't mean much here.
I fumed. You mean he gets away with it?
Little Pip,
Velvet Remedy said softly, putting a calming hoof on my shoulder.
Put it in the past. He may have tried to rob you, but he didn't succeed.
I shrugged off her hoof and rounded on Monterey Jack. So, you're just going to stand there and deny it, are you? Well, No, he said firmly. Am not going... Wait, what? Monterey? Homage was looking at the beige, cheese shop unicorn, her purchases momentarily forgotten. The guard pony had suddenly stiffened. I have 2 colts and a fillies to look after. I had to make it home safely, and the supplies would have been wasted on you. You weren't even smart enough to loot corpses. You wouldn't have survived the week.
Clearly not.
Velvet Remedy deadpanned.
Monterey Jack, the guard said dangerously. Do you realise what you're admitting here?
Monterey Jack snorted, staring at me. I'm not a liar, and I'm not ashamed of what I tried to do. Making sure my children still have a father is more important than some foolish little stranger who doesn't have the good sense not to walk into a slaver camp. He looked to the guard. After Clarinet was killed, I'm all they have left. The guard pony neighed.
Well, probably not anymore. You know the law. Banditry will get you executed.
Wait, what? Velvet Remedy gasped. The guard clamped down the bit on his battle saddle, and I heard the light supported weapon reload.
Sorry, Monterey Jack, but you're gonna have to come with me.
I've changed my mind. I'm not pressing charges. Nothing happened. The guard scowled at me.
Sorry, kid, but it's your word against his. And like I said, your non-citizen word doesn't mean the dirt on my hoof around here.
I paced back and forth outside the elevator. This was insane. They couldn't kill a pony for trying and failing to rob some pony. Could they? Goddesses, why didn't I just keep my stupid mouth shut? The elevator doors opened. I'd left Velvet Remedy looking into the laws of Ten Pony Tower, hoping she could find something while I attempted to talk to DJ Pony. Stepping into the elevator, I added this to the list of things I wanted to ask him about. For that matter, why couldn't Monterey Jack have just kept his own stupid mouth shut? In the Equestrian wasteland, honesty was not always a virtue. The elevator began to glide upwards. I took a deep breath. I was about to meet DJ Pony. I wondered what to expect. I hoped he'd be willing to talk to me. If not, this would have been a long walk for nothing. Well, no, not nothing. It was a long walk for a spa treatment. Actually, still somewhat worth it. The doors opened, and I stepped out into a rich marble foyer, the centre of which was dominated by a water fountain. A huge alicorn made of aged dark bronze reared up before me, wings spread out over the foyer. The necklace around the alicorn's neck bore a water talisman with a large sapphire set into the centre. Thanks to the talisman, the fountain still flowed with fresh, clean water, even 200 years after the apocalypse. I remembered the pure, non-irradiated water we had enjoyed in our baths and in the spa, and I wondered just how many water talisman the MAS hub had, and how many could benefit from them if they weren't all hoarded together in this place. Stairs wrapped around the foyer to a mezzanine level. Inset in the balcony were matching bronze letters, Ministry of Arcane Science, Manhattan. Beyond the fountain was a large set of double doors, bearing the title, Twilight Sparkles Athenium. Above on the mezzanine was a second, nearly identical set of double doors. MAS Emergency Broadcast Station, authorised unicorns only. I took a deep breath and stepped forward towards the stairs. A second pair of elevator doors slid open behind me. I turned to see the grey unicorn man, Homage, step out and look around. I smiled, trying not to look nervous. You're here to see DJ Pony too? The other unicorn nodded. She was about my size, the only other adult pony I'd seen who was born with a similar, smaller frame. I waved a hoof for her to go first. She was a citizen after all. When we reached the landing, the double doors to the MAS Emergency Broadcast Station swung open quietly, making me think of the wild tale of Manhattan Ghost the travelling merchant had told us. Inside were multiple mainframes and walls of computer screens giving off a bird's eye view of the vast majority of the Equestrian wasteland as far as I could tell. Homage clopped past me as I stopped to stare, searching about as I spotted New Appaloosa on one of them.
Impressive, isn't it?
Homage asked. I nodded, noticing that while most of the screens had clear, sharp images, several flickered and suffered odd distortions, and one large set of screens was dead black. You've been in here before?
Oh, a few times.
She walked over to a bank of buttons and lights, raising a hoof to press one. She turned and trotted back towards the centre of the room, where a microphone was raising from the floor. Homage's horn glowed, and her voice changed by magic. Good morning, Equestrian Wastelanders! Homage cried into the mic, her voice now male and very familiar. How is every pony doing? This is your pal, DJ Pony, and, well, it's that time. That's right, time for some news. I fell to my haunches, staring at the little grey unicorn's voice being belted over the airways. I hear a rumour that Monterey Jack, cheese shop owner at that oh-so-hoity-toity Ten Pony Tower, has been arrested for deciding that being a thieving jackass is the appropriate response to an act of kindness. Remember what I keep telling you, my little ponies. Treat each other with kindness and respect. Or don't, and watch it come and bite you in the tail. In other news, some ponies finally arrived to fix my toaster. Hallelujah, it's breakfast time. Here's a little sapphire shores to get you through your morning. Ten minutes later, I stood on the windswept roof of Ten Pony Tower as Homage made a refining adjustment to the gemstone set into the centre of one of the dishes on the broadcast tower. I stared out over the grey labyrinth of Manhattan. From here, I could see another Ministry Hub building from which was considerably worse for wear, Horseshoe Tower, and even the Pony of Friendship out in the harbour. Breathtakingly blue ocean stretched out until the waters vanished under the offshore fog.
Ironic, isn't it?
Homage's voice asked, her voice no longer that of DJ Pony.
I'm told that statue was a gift from zebra folk, generations before the war.
I turned to look at her, but caught sight of something far off on the horizon that grabbed my attention. A needle-like white tower rose all the way into the clouds. I blinked, realising I'd seen it before, but not over there. Before, when I'd spotted in the distance, it was... I turned to look out in the direction I knew the tower should have been and saw. There were two of them. I pulled out my binoculars and slowly turned, scanning the horizon. Far off, protruding from the mountains near Old Appaloosa, I thought I spotted a third. How many of these towers were there?
I see you spotted them,
Homage said casually. I lowered the binoculars. What are they?
No idea,
Homage admitted.
Something pre-war and really sophisticated. What I do know is that each one has a station house at the base and observation eyes about a third of the way up. DJ Pony managed to hack into one of them. Between those eyes and reports from loyal listeners, every DJ Pony has been able to keep ponies informed about dangers, uplifted by the tales of heroes, and generally appraised of what goes on in the wasteland, and give them beautiful music to help make their life out there a bit more bearable. It's all I can do to help every pony, but I figure the most I can do is the least I can do.
I looked at Homage with amazement and bordering on reverence.
You, on the other hoof, it seems you can take a lot more, and so I'd like your help.
Footnote, level up. New perk, how we do it down on the farm. In combat, your critical hits are more devastating. Your damage from critical hits, including sneak attack criticals, is increased by 50%. This does not affect the chance to cause a critical hit.